What if I told you that one of the most nutritious foods on the planet, a grain that fed entire empires for thousands of years, was deliberately and violently suppressed? A plant so powerful, so central to a culture's identity, that conquering armies had to make it illegal, burning the fields and threatening death to anyone who dared to grow it. And what if I told you that today, the descendants of that same sacred plant are classified as a noxious weed, a billion-dollar problem for the very same industrial agricultural system that first erased it from our history? This is not a work of fiction. This is the story of a grain that was turned into a weed, a food that was made a crime. And it raises a very important question. Why? Why was this ancient source of life targeted for destruction? And why is it still being fought today? My name is Marcus, and for most of my life as a botanist, I have been fascinated by the stories that plants tell. They are living history books, carrying the legacy of civilizations in their very DNA. But some stories are not just about cultivation. They are about survival. They are about resilience in the face of incredible violence and suppression. Today, we are going to talk about a plant that embodies this struggle more than any other I have ever encountered. A plant that was once at the heart of one of the most powerful empires in the Americas. A grain so revered, it was called the food of immortality. And yet, for centuries, it was driven into the shadows, forced to live as a fugitive in the wild places, its cultivation a secret act of rebellion. This is the story of amaranth. Our journey begins 8,000 years ago in the highlands of Mesoamerica. Long before the rise of the Aztecs, long before the first stones of the Great Pyramids were laid in Egypt, the people of this land were cultivating a tiny, powerful seed. Archaeological evidence from sites in northern Argentina dates the cultivation of amaranth back 8,000 years. Seeds have been found in the caves of Tehuacan Puebla in Mexico, dating from around 4,000 years before the Common Era. They called it huautli. We know it today as amaranth. The name we use comes from the ancient Greek word amaranthos, which means the one that does not wither, or the never fading. And it is a fitting name. The plant itself is stunning, growing up to 9 feet tall with vibrant plumes of flowers in shades of gold, purple, and brilliant red that hold their color even after being harvested and dried. The genus Amaranthus contains over 70 species, found on every continent, though only about a dozen have been cultivated by humans. 3 species in particular were domesticated for their grain: Amaranthus cruentus and Amaranthus hypochondriacus, which are native to Mexico and Central America, and Amaranthus caudatus, which comes from the South American Andes. But its true power lies in the thousands of tiny, pale seeds each plant produces. For the ancient peoples of the Americas, this was a foundational food, one of the 3 pillars of their diet, alongside maize and beans. It was a perfect source of nutrition, a complete protein containing all 9 essential amino acids, something incredibly rare in the plant kingdom. It was, and still is, a nutritional powerhouse, far superior to modern grains like rice or corn. For thousands of years, amaranth was a symbol of life and sustenance. But when the Aztec Empire rose to power in the 15th and 16th centuries, its significance deepened. It became more than just food. It became a central part of their spiritual and ceremonial life. The Aztecs revered a powerful deity, Huitzilopochtli, the god of the sun and of war. He was the patron god of their capital city, Tenochtitlan, the magnificent metropolis that now lies buried beneath modern-day Mexico City. Amaranth was one of the 3 major crops collected as tribute from the 17 provinces that made up the Aztec Empire, alongside maize and beans. Historical records show that much of the amaranth collected was used specifically for ceremonial purposes. Each year, in a grand ceremony, the Aztecs would create a life-sized statue of Huitzilopochtli. But this was no statue of stone or gold. It was made from amaranth seeds, mixed with honey, and, according to some accounts, human blood from sacrificial offerings. This statue, this edible idol, would be worshipped and paraded through the city. At the end of the ceremony, it was broken into pieces and distributed among the people, who would eat their god in a sacred act of communion. For the Aztecs, eating amaranth was a way to consume the power of Huitzilopochtli himself. It was a ritual that bound their society together, connecting them to their gods, to the sun, and to the very cycle of life and death. This practice was the primary reason why amaranth would soon face annihilation, and it was this sacred act that sealed its fate. In 1519, the Spanish conquistador Hernán Cortés arrived in Mesoamerica. He and his men were horrified by the Aztec religion. They saw the human sacrifices, the blood rituals, and the worship of what they considered pagan idols as the work of the devil. They were on a mission, not just of conquest, but of conversion. To control the Aztec Empire, they knew they had to break its spiritual backbone, and they identified amaranth, the grain at the very heart of the Aztecs' most sacred rituals, as a primary target. To eradicate the Aztec religion, they had to eradicate its food. Cortés and the Spanish friars who followed him outlawed the cultivation of amaranth. It was a calculated act of cultural destruction. They burned the vast, beautiful fields of flowering amaranth. They made it a crime to possess the seeds. According to some historical accounts, the punishment for growing amaranth was death. They promised to personally cut off the hands of anyone caught cultivating the sacred grain. They were mercilessly effective. The grain that had fed an empire for millennia was systematically wiped out, its production brought to a near-complete halt. It never quite took root as a grain crop in Europe, though it spread quickly through Africa, where, much like in parts of Asia and the Caribbean, the leafy varieties remain a popular vegetable to this day. But you cannot truly kill a plant that is the one that does not wither. While the Spanish destroyed the large-scale cultivation, they could not destroy the plant itself. Amaranth is a survivor. Indigenous farmers, at great personal risk, preserved the seeds. They hid them, saved them, and planted them in secret, in small hidden patches where the Spanish would not see. The plant itself helped, escaping from the fields and continuing to grow wild, a fugitive from the conquest, waiting patiently in the margins. For 400 years, amaranth lived in the shadows. It was never completely lost, but its role as a major food source was over. It survived in the form of a traditional sweet called alegría, which means joy in Spanish, made from popped amaranth and honey, a faint echo of the sacred statues of Huitzilopochtli. This sweet is still popular in Mexico today, sold by street vendors and in candy shops, a delicious reminder of a history that most people have forgotten. The story of its survival is a testament to the resilience of the plant and the people who protected it. In Guatemala, the Mayan people, who also have an ancient relationship with amaranth, faced a similar threat centuries later. During the brutal Guatemalan Civil War, which lasted from 1960 to 1996, government forces targeted indigenous communities, burning their fields and destroying their food supplies in an attempt to crush their resistance. Once again, amaranth faced extinction, and once again it was saved by the courage of those who knew its value. Farmers poured handfuls of the precious seeds into glass jars, burying them in their fields or hiding them under the floorboards of their homes. One Maya Quiche woman named Magali Salazar famously hid a small jar of amaranth seeds behind a ceiling tile in her house. After the war, when it was safe, she retrieved those seeds and began sharing them with other farmers, bringing the plant back from the brink. In 2004, she was invited to a community called Cachu Alum, which means Mother Earth in Maya Achi, where she distributed her seeds among the members and taught them how to plant and cook amaranth. Today, those seeds have spread to hundreds of Guatemalan gardens, and Kachu alum has grown to include more than 400 families from 24 villages. This was not just an act of planting. It was an act of profound cultural resistance, a reclaiming of an identity that had been targeted for erasure. It was not until the 1970s that amaranth began its slow journey back into the light in North America. Researchers and health food pioneers rediscovered the lost grain of the Aztecs, and its incredible nutritional profile sparked a revival. Today, it is a billion-dollar product found in health food stores and trendy cafes, praised as a superfood and an ancient grain. But here's the great irony of this story. While one part of our society is celebrating amaranth as a health food, another, far more powerful part is actively trying to kill it. The very same industrial agricultural system that profits from the fragile, chemically dependent grains that replaced amaranth now considers it a mortal enemy. Certain species of wild amaranth, most notably a variety called Palmer amaranth, have become one of the most problematic superweeds in modern farming. It is a farmer's nightmare. It grows incredibly fast, up to 3 inches a day. It is brutally competitive, choking out crops like corn and soybeans. And in an incredible display of its will to survive, it has evolved resistance to glyphosate, the active ingredient in the world's most widely used herbicide, Roundup. A plant that survived the Spanish conquest is now surviving the chemical onslaught of modern agriculture. Think about the profound symbolism of this. A plant that was once a sacred food, a cornerstone of a sustainable agricultural system that fed millions, was banned and turned into a fugitive. Now, its wild descendants are fighting back against the industrial monocultures that replaced it, a system that has given us soil depletion, chemical pollution, and a loss of biodiversity. The agricultural industry spends billions of dollars a year on herbicides to kill a weed that is more nutritious, more resilient, and more adaptable to a changing climate than the crops they are trying to protect. Amaranth doesn't need our help to survive. It is a C4 plant, which means it is highly efficient at fixing carbon in high temperature and low moisture environments. It thrives in drought, can generate seeds with up to 40 days of no rain, grows in poor soil, and produces tens of thousands of seeds per plant. A single plant can produce hundreds of thousands of seeds. It is, in many ways, a perfect food for a future of climate uncertainty. And yet, we poison it. So, what are we throwing away when we treat this plant as a weed? We are throwing away one of the most complete sources of protein in the plant kingdom. As I mentioned, amaranth contains all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine, which is often deficient in other grains. At 14% protein, it contains nearly double the amount found in corn and rice. Researchers in Guatemala found it to be one of the most nutritious plant-based proteins available, but its benefits go far beyond protein. It is an excellent source of minerals that are crucial for our health. A single cooked cup provides over 100% of the daily recommended intake of manganese, a mineral essential for brain function and metabolism. It is also an excellent source of magnesium and phosphorus, and contains at least half of the recommended daily value of manganese. It is packed with iron, selenium, and vitamin B6. Studies have shown that amaranth can help lower cholesterol and inflammation. It contains a peptide called leucine, which is being studied for its potential anti-inflammatory and cancer-preventive properties. And of course, it is naturally gluten-free, making it a wonderful option for those with celiac disease or gluten sensitivity. This is not a weed. This is a pharmacy disguised as a plant. I remember my first encounter with the living history of this plant. I was in a small remote village in the mountains of Oaxaca, Mexico, speaking with an elderly Zapotec farmer. He was showing me his milpa, the traditional intercropping system where maize, beans, and squash are grown together in a symbiotic relationship. As we walked, I noticed a tall, beautiful plant with a deep red, feathery plume growing among the corn stalks. I asked him what it was. He smiled and said, "That is the Huautli, the old ones. It grows itself. We don't plant it, it just comes. It is a gift. He explained that his grandmother had taught him to always leave a few of the plants in the field. She told him it was a reminder of the time before the Spanish, a time when the people had their own food and their own gods. He didn't know about its complete protein profile or its manganese content. He just knew it was strong, and that it had always been there, and that it was part of his heritage. He was not just a farmer, he was a living librarian, a custodian of a knowledge that had been passed down through generations of quiet resistance. That conversation changed the way I see this plant forever. Reclaiming this knowledge is simple. The first step is to see the plant not as a weed, but as a food. You can buy amaranth grain in most health food stores or online. It is incredibly versatile. You can cook it into a porridge, similar to oatmeal, which makes a fantastic protein-packed breakfast. 2. Cook amaranth. Combine 1 cup of dried grain with 2 cups of liquid. Bring it to a boil, then simmer for 15 to 20 minutes. It has a peppery taste with a pleasantly sweet, grassy aroma, and it pairs wonderfully with squash, corn, sesame, cinnamon, vanilla, and chocolate. You can pop it like tiny popcorn. Just heat a dry skillet over high heat, add a tablespoon of seeds, and shake the pan constantly. In seconds, they will start to pop and jump. You can sprinkle this popped amaranth on salads, mix it into yogurt, or use it to make the traditional Mexican alegría candy with a bit of honey. You can also use amaranth flour in baking, though it's best mixed with other flours since it's gluten-free. And you can eat the leaves of many amaranth species, which are cooked like spinach and are incredibly nutritious in their own right. In China, Southeast Asia, Southern India, West Africa, and the Caribbean, the leafy varieties are still a popular vegetable today. But the most powerful thing you can do is to grow it. Find a seed company that sells heirloom varieties like Hopi Red Dye or Golden Giant. Plant the tiny seeds in a sunny spot in your garden after the last frost. It needs very little. It prefers higher elevations, but can be grown in many climates with proper soil. It will grow tall and beautiful, a defiant splash of color in your yard. And at the end of the season, you can harvest thousands of seeds from just a few plants, more than enough to feed your family and to share with your neighbors. By planting amaranth, you are participating in that ancient act of resistance. You are preserving a genetic legacy that survived a conquest. You are rejecting a food system that profits from dependence and embracing one that is built on abundance and resilience. There is something deeply moving about a plant that refuses to be erased. In my decades of studying forgotten crops, I have come to believe that the plants we choose to grow and the plants we choose to destroy say something profound about who we are as a society. When the Spanish conquistadors burned the amaranth fields, they were not just destroying a crop. They were trying to destroy a culture, a belief system, a way of life. And yet, here we are, 500 years later, and the plant is still here. It is still growing in the cracks of our industrial system, still offering its gifts to anyone who cares to look. Have you ever seen this plant? Perhaps growing in an abandoned lot or a crack in the sidewalk, and dismissed it as a simple weed? Have you ever eaten alegría in Mexico without knowing the deep and violent history behind that joyful little snack? Perhaps someone in your family still grows it, or perhaps you remember your grandmother cooking with it. I would be fascinated to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. This is a story that is still being written, a story of rediscovery and reconnection. The next time you see this majestic plant with its proud, unfading plumes, I hope you see it differently. Do not see a weed. See a survivor. See a symbol of resilience. See a food that was so powerful, it had to be made illegal. See a legacy that was never truly lost, only buried. The Aztec Empire is gone. The Spanish conquistadors are dust. The great chemical companies of the 20th century will one day be a memory. But amaranth is still here. It is still growing. It is still walking its quiet, relentless path through our world, waiting for us to remember. It is the food of immortality, not because it makes us live forever, but because it itself refuses to die.